Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Product Uncensored show with your host, Colin Pell. Now, today I'm super happy and honored and proud to let all of you know that since the last episode, we hit this milestone of 1,000 downloads for our podcast across all podcasting platforms. So thank you, everyone who has been listening and following this show. It's really a confidence booster for me. And, it just gives me that encouragement that this experiment that I started with last year is worth continuing. So, yeah, we've got another great guest on the show. But before we go there, right, let me just introduce the Product Uncensored show to anyone who might be watching or listening who is new. So there are usually 4 things that I let you know. The first being that I write at www.productuncensored.com. Should be somewhere down here. And if you like to watch our episodes, we are available on YouTube. And if you go there, please don't forget to click on the subscribe button and also hit that bell notification icon so that you will always be aware when we have new content. If you prefer the audio experience, we have our podcasting platforms, which should be showing up here, I think, this way. All major podcasting platforms. And finally, if you've been following this show, you like this show and you want to support this show, there will be a link in the description somewhere about now, I think, that you can support this show for the price of a coffee. Okay, now I've gotten all the general niceties out of the way. So let's introduce our guest for today and get this conversation on the road. Now, as usual, our guests are always very special guests. And for this particular guest, I have waited almost 1 year to get him on the show. I first met him when he was passing through Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia many years ago. And, when he indicated that he was ready to be on the show, I totally snapped him up. So I'm very, very happy to have him on the show. He is no stranger to the product scene in Southeast Asia, especially since at one point in time, he was based in Thailand. And for those of you who are following the show, I've only ever had one guest from Thailand, and it's not for a lack of trying. I've actually had 2 people, turn me down because they weren't comfortable. So yes, if you have any suggestions for, product leaders who are based or used to be based in Thailand, I would love to get them on the show. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the former Chief Product Officer at True Digital Group, the current CEO of Tacklit. Please welcome to the show, Chris Griffiths. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, Colin. Thanks for having me, mate. And thanks for being patient while we found a time to sit down and have this chat. I can't believe it's like saying a year ago when we were first talking about coming on the podcast. So time flies, I think.
It does. But yeah, I'm super excited to have you on the show. And again, like I said, you are one of the few people, actually, you're the second person who used to be based in Thailand. And I would love, we're definitely going to deep dive into your time there as well. But also because I think in general, your career has been very interesting. And of course, now you are the CEO of your own health tech company, which is something that I also want to really deep dive into. So thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. Now, as usual, I usually have like a lot of stuff to cover. So let's start with a gentle start, right? So maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and, perhaps how you got into product management as well.
Yeah, sure thing, mate. I'm just hearing your intro there. Just kudos to you, man, for starting this podcast and helping the community. I know you've been involved in a lot of the community events over in Southeast Asia, and you're speaking at some upcoming conferences. So yeah, awesome that you're setting up these things is one thing, but then kind of keeping them going and building momentum behind them. So yeah, congrats on the 1,000 downloads, and
thank you.
I look forward to seeing it grow and continue on. I've listened to a few of your episodes with Rizwan. I listened to one with Sharon, who we used to work together at Seek. So doing some awesome stuff, mate. So yeah, good on you, and yeah, happy to chat. Let me a quick intro to myself. So I'm Chris Griffiths. I'm originally from the UK. I'm now based back in Melbourne, Australia. my career, as I'm sure we'll kind of touch on through this conversation, I've had the privilege to work on some really interesting product experiences across different industries, different geographies, working with fantastic teams and people from all kind of backgrounds and cultures. Started off very much as a hands-on product manager, kind of probably before even product management, at least at my time, was kind of well defined or well understood, and maybe you can make a case that it's still not that well defined or well understood, but so kind of I've enjoyed kind of working in all manner of different roles, and as you say, now kind of I've taken the plunge to actually start my own thing. So kind of been working on Tacklit for kind of the last kind of 8 to 9 months, trying to build some tech and some data capture services to help mental health practitioners. So yeah, happy to share with you and talk about anything which you think would be interesting for your listeners to learn about.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction. So, first question. Are you originally from the UK or are you originally from Australia?
No, originally from the UK, mate.
UK, right?
Yeah, my accent, I've got one of these wandering accents where I kind of have picked up twangs from kind of all over. So yeah, I probably have a bit of Aussie twang. I've been based in Australia since the very beginning of 2014. So what's that now? Kind of 7 years. I was up in Bangkok for kind of just under a year and a half in that time. But yeah, no, originally from the UK. So I'm born and raised in a small village in Wales. Kind of went to university, ended up living in London, working out of London. I spent some time in the US. I was working with Travelocity, so kind of spent some time over there, and and then Australia and Southeast Asia. So yeah, still British, still hold a British passport. That's how I would kind of classify when I fill in a form and I have to fill in my nationality. But it's been a long time since I've actually lived back home, if that makes sense. So Australia definitely feels like home. My kids are both born here in Australia, so they're two little Aussies, but. It's been an interesting journey. I'm again privileged to have been able to kind of try and living in all these different places and cultures and stuff. So
okay, all right. So the very important question for you, Aaron Ramsey, is he the real deal or is he a fake?
Aaron Ramsey. Oh, goodness me. Yeah, my soccer player knowledge is it probably has fallen off a lot. It's kind of interesting because it's I used to be I'm a big Everton supporter in the English Premier League, and that's my hometown team. And I used to follow a lot when I was back home in the UK, and then I kind of maybe it's getting older, maybe it's having kids, time zone or what, but I kind of it kind of drifted away, and then obviously everyone here in Australia, definitely here in Melbourne, is a massive AFL fan, like huge. It's a huge kind of part of the culture here, and draws massive crowds and things. But it's just one of those sports where I don't know. I've been to a few of the matches, and I kind of try and get involved, as games are going on, because you're around lots of people who are really passionate about it. But it's it's interesting. I've never really kind of co-opted it and kind of got into the AFL. So so, and unfortunately for me, like Wales actually went on a really good run. I think maybe the last Euros where we kind of got through to, I think it was the semi-finals and whatever else. So being a Welshman,
I don't remember how far they went, but they qualified. So yeah,
and it all happened when I wasn't there to enjoy it. So you kind of see, pictures of friends and family all kind of immersed in that. And I had a lot of friends and family who actually went and followed the team on the ride through and whatever else. But yeah, it was a bit far away for me. So yeah, I still try and keep in touch with it a little bit, but definitely less than I once did, for sure.
Well, you should keep track of Everton now. They're doing great guns. It's got a new manager, and he's got them playing. So yeah, I mean,
exactly. So fingers crossed we can actually get maybe some European football this season, or it'd be nice.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, moving from there, I think it's a nice segue to just get a little bit more like when you started. Your role, you worked as a credit risk analyst, right? So I'm very interested to know, how did you get into product management? And I think your first role was with confused.com. So yeah, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, Yeah, so journey for me was kind of I left university and I joined one of the large banks in the UK and kind of worked in one of their kind of almost like their graduate schemes, I guess, in terms of where they kind of, train and build up skill sets. My role was kind of as an analyst in what was the personal lending department. So kind of working on credit cards, loans and things like that, doing a whole manner of things from algorithms to assess people's risk through to how do we manage processes around, managing people's accounts, all the software that comes under that. So I kind of got immersed into that. But kind of never really intended or wanted to work for a really big bank or anything like that. It was a good company to work for, and I worked with great people. But kind of when I finished that initial intake, I took a break from that role and went traveling for a year. So it was always part of my plan was I wanted to go and see the world, and so we packed a backpack and kind of headed off. Just under 12 months in the end, we kind of my then girlfriend, now wife, and I kind of did a lot of the usual places across North and Central America, across into Asia through China, down through Southeast Asia, India, and then Australia, New Zealand as well, and had a blast. And essentially, I kind of got back to the UK after that trip. Having spent, we'd saved up pretty hard to go on that trip, and then we'd kind of been slowly drawing down on that balance as frugally as we could across that journey, and got back to the UK, and the GFC had hit. So this is like 2008 and what have you, and several of the banks, including the one that I worked for, had been kind of semi-acquired by governments, and kind of partnering to try and kind of stay afloat during this interesting time. So I was kind of like, well, I didn't really want to go back into the bank anyway, from a passion and kind of a purpose perspective. But with that kind of happening, it closed that door off to me. And one of the people I had been working with there had moved to join this startup called Confused.com. And he'd gone in and he was working as I think it's like a strategy manager or something within that business. And it was literally just over a phone call and a coffee with him where he said, I'm working inside this fintech company. You should come on and have a chat. We're looking for good people. So I went and I went and interviewed there and just met people, and it was kind of one of those conversations where it was an early company. It had been around for 3 or 4 years at that point in time, but it was still very young in terms of its scale. Like, it was serving millions of customers, but still only had like 60 people working there. So I ended up taking a role there. Which I even forget the job title. It might have been, I don't even think it was called product manager. It was called product something. I was in the product department, but it was essentially, the brief was like, just come in and do stuff and help us grow. And yeah, so my early experiences of the product were just around, literally every week we'd come in and we'd look at this massive pile of problems, things that we needed to fix from a customer lens, from a marketing lens, from an operational lens, from a website usability lens. And it was just about trying to find the problems which are having the biggest impact, and then coming up with things which could improve things, getting those things implemented, measuring whether that actually helped or not, rinse and repeat. And so it was my first taste, I guess, of, like I say, product management, and my role there kind of grew, and I ended up I kind of worked on, like, this is a big comparison site service, so it was kind of, the value proposition was around helping people save money by finding the very best deal. So instead of having to go and shop in multiple destinations where you have to provide lots of information time and time again, it was like, do it once through this service, and we'll then send all that information to all of our providers and come back with the very best deal for you. So, that was on insurances, that was on credit cards, that was on energy. There's a whole bunch of things that we did. So kind of, my role there grew. I got to experience working in these lots of different verticals. So I was kind of worked on some of the insurance propositions, the energy proposition. I then focused for a time on the what we called the money product, so credit cards, bank accounts, etc. And it was just a great grounding in, like, how to think about customer experience, and like how to think about customers' needs and what it is that they're trying to do, and then trying to make sure that your product and service kind of basically does as good a job as possible of addressing those needs in a really kind of frictionless way. So
Sorry,
yeah, so it was a really
can I just interrupt for a bit, because the part that I was I wanted to ask you was like, when you decided to join Confused, right? Did you know what product management was, or was it just that there was the opportunity, you were trying to get out of this, get back on the job trail after your long vacation?
Yeah, no, it was definitely, I think what attracted me to go into Confused was more the people. Yeah, I think I've been a big, maybe it's my personality or kind of philosophy, but it's kind of served me well, which is like, just find people who you think you can learn from, who you think have good values, and will approach things in the right way, care about the right things, and do that first, and then kind of anything that comes after that will be kind of, you'll probably be in a good spot. So yeah, the attraction for me was probably more about the people and the opportunity to work in, a pure digital business. I found that exciting and interesting. Yeah. I like the fact that the team was a bit smaller. So again, it was kind of like, my only work experience to date at that point had been in a really large bank, which had, multiple sites across the UK, tens of thousands of staff or whatever else. You're very much a small cog in a big machine. So I really liked the fact that I was able to meet with all of these key leaders as part of my kind of interview process. The business was all on, at this point in time, was on one floor in a building in Cardiff where we were based. So yeah, so it was more, I think it was less about the fundamentals of the role, but more just the fact that this feels like the energy of this business feels great. The people I've met, are smart, passionate, and and then you look at like where the business is at, where they're wanting to head to, and that purpose of basically trying to help people save money. And this is a point in time where with GFC, the UK and other markets, of course, were going into recession. So, the chance to save people money and be able to get better deals so that they could, do other things with their finances, etc., was actually a really, it was a really interesting time to go in and do that. So yeah, so it was. I think again, I probably signed up literally knowing that I was going to jump in and help. I was a new hire, so like it wasn't as if I was replacing someone's previous role. It was more like because they were growing, they just needed more people, and I think the approach they probably took with me was they just threw a bunch of stuff at me and saw what I could or couldn't do, what I liked, didn't like, or whatever else, and then kind of my journey was kind of shaped a little bit around that. So so it was kind of, there was no master plan, or it wasn't by design. It was just kind of a jump in and help fundamentally, and a lot of that help became working with the software engineers, the data engineers, working with our UX teams. I got a really great exposure in that role, and this would be something I would recommend actually to any product people who are at start in their careers or looking for interesting learnings, is roles where you get exposed to lots of different parts of the business. I think are really really interesting. So at that time at Confused, I was doing, we were running the P&L for our section of the site, so you had to be on your numbers and know the maths and the unit economics of what we were spending versus the revenue. We had to do lots of partner management. The nature of that business was we had panels of providers. So, we'd have to be having meetings with insurance companies or banks or, providers of these services. Again, that relationship was important from a commercial perspective. And then obviously actually building the product experience and being able to, understand the economics of, all right, how many visitors are we bringing to the site? This is back in 2008. So mobile apps and even mobile web at that time was still very, very early. So it was very much desktop kind of web focused. So it was how do you bring people to the site? How do we then convert them through to becoming customers? And then how do we bring them back and, create that repeat custom? So, so it was, I don't know if I answered your question there. Sorry, rambling around, but it was a great experience and a really great grounding for me. And, I was very lucky that I worked for a manager who put a lot of trust in me, gave me space, was happy to see me fail at times. It was kind of
just the learning experience, right?
A great place to start. Really, really good.
I guess, so the question that comes out of this, right, is You were talking about how, you had to learn the P&L and how things work. And that's always fantastic. I think that's always one of the, for me personally, one of the big pluses or pros of joining a smaller or startup type company, because you get to experience all the different things. But the flip side of that is when you join a smaller company, it's usually all hands on deck. It's, hustle, hustle, hustle. So, I mean, I'm spending a bit longer here than I planned to, but I was curious to know, like, how did you manage to sort of learn and hustle at the same time? Because, in a small startup, when like I said, it's all hands on deck, right? It's not an easy task to carve out time to learn while trying to, get things working, fight the fires, do everything at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy I like to draw upon, I've used this several times, but like is this idea of the plate spinning. So I think in most roles, there's several key factors that you have to kind of pay attention to, and you can't let fall off, if that makes sense. So kind of the plate spin analogy is the one I like, where it's like you have to pay all of these areas enough kind of attention to make sure that you don't kind of drop the ball in that specific thing. And I guess the thing I learned with it was like, I think it was, where probably I first picked up kind of this art of storytelling. So I think that a big part of the role, of product managers, I think, is about taking people on the journey, helping others understand. If you're deep in something, spending hours and hours a day and tens of hours every week thinking about a problem, how can you take, whether it be teammates, executives, partners, customers, on a similar journey, get them to think about your vision, understand it, in a really small amount of time. So I think the thing I learned was that we could spend all of our time fighting fires because there was always something on fire.
Sure.
But if you end up fighting those kind of near-term fires just day on day, week on week, you actually miss this opportunity to make the bigger steps. So the next time you might sit down with senior executive team or whatever else, they're only seeing you once a month. And if the only story you can tell them is, hey, we fixed all of these little things or all these customer queries or whatever else, it's like that story is like, that story may be very valid, but it's not going to kind of help people kind of go on that journey with you for the vision. So it was always about balancing and like, how can we make sure that we're fixing the fires which are really going to hurt us, the things that we absolutely have to fix, but then stuff that we can kind of live with, even if we don't like it, that we can muddle our way through to make sure we're carving out the time to be able to tackle those bigger chunks. Yeah. That was kind of how I picked it up, and kind of like how I've tried to explain it to my teams, as I've kind of built product teams and thought about what a product management function should do. It's much more about, I think, that there's always going to be near-term things that you have to do, but how can you balance that by making sure it doesn't suck in all of your time and attention? Because if it does, the opportunity cost is you never get to do that game changer type thing, or that piece which will really kind of make that significant difference. So I think it was just balance. It was just balance and trying to figure out, and and again, getting it wrong a lot as well. I think that's important, which is like, through these things. And for me, I've worked in several different organizations, and what worked well in one organization would not just cut and lift and work the same way in the other organization, because every organization has its own kind of nuances and intricacies and stuff like that. So again, it's kind of trying to understand, I guess, at a principle level, and then from there being able to kind of, use your judgment, use your experience, build relationships to be able to kind of apply that to the context that you're in. So I don't know. That's kind of how I think about it.
No, I totally agree. I think one of the things that you pointed out that I feel is really critical is, telling that story, bringing people on that journey, because if not, you're always doing the bidding of, what other people think is important. And I'm not saying that what the senior execs think or even the CEO thinks is, less important or less valuable. It's just that, sometimes different people have different biases to what they want to do and what they want to fix. And I guess one of the key roles of a product manager, or even if you're more so if you're a product leader, I think, is to really make sure that the platform and the vision, I think, is very clear that, hey, we know this is the problem that we're trying to solve now, but we can't, like you say, miss the boat on the bigger opportunity of what's happening within the industry. So I thought that was really, really good. So yeah, if you're listening or watching, and especially if you're sort of newish to this role, I think what Chris has mentioned is super, super helpful, right? You're doing the balancing act, but always make sure that, you don't just spend time fixing problems, because yeah, I mean, we want to solve problems, but we're not firefighting all the time. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, I need to move on along because your career is very interesting. So tell me a bit more about how you ended up in Australia with Seek, because you went, you got there, and you prior to that you were in the hotel industry with another startup. So yeah, how did that happen? That you ended up switching countries, and was it an easy decision?
Yeah, so I was actually with, it wasn't a startup at that time. I was actually with Travelocity. So Travelocity was the third biggest OTA behind kind of Expedia and Priceline, so Priceline Booking.com, in the kind of the online travel business. So Travelocity was the brand that we had in North and Latin America. Lastminute.com was the hero brand across Europe. And we had a brand called Zuji, which is kind of Asia Pacific. Mm-hmm. And kind of I went in from, I joined there from Confused. I was based in London. Again, kind of, attraction for me was working in a new problem space, taking a lot of what I'd kind of learned at Confused around customer experience, like data-driven decision making. A lot of what we did at Confused was around kind of trying to optimize the key conversion funnels. And if you think about travel as essentially it's an e-commerce transaction, a really big part of that business is trying to get people from top of the funnel to purchasing a hotel or a flight. So I got the chance to move over there, and again, it was kind of, I'd had a great experience with Confused, and I felt like I could have absolutely continued on there. But when I got kind of, approached about this opportunity to go and, one was the move to London, which was kind of interesting from a personal perspective, go and live in a new city. And obviously London's kind of the heartbeat of most digital businesses in the UK, and then get to work with some really interesting and smart people. So I was there, and we were building at the time. It was through a period of consolidation in the travel space, and what we were trying to do at that time with Travelocity was build out kind of a global shopping platform, essentially for all of those brands and all of those markets to be able to kind of run on from an underlying tech perspective. And I kind of ended up jumping in and was pulled into trying to guide that from a hotel perspective. So great experience. I worked with people in the US. We had a large development center in Buenos Aires, so I spent a lot of time in Argentina. We had another development center in Bangalore in India. And again, just really interesting problems to try and solve. So again, these businesses, Travelocity, Last Minute, had been born, I want to say the late 90s, probably, kind of like that was when the first wave of these OTAs came on live. And then this is circa 2011 or something. So there's there's 12, 13 years of legacy in these businesses. We had multiple different platforms in various states of flux. And essentially what we're trying to do was reinvent that and try and do it in a way whereby all of these brands globally, I want to say that we were in 35 different countries or something like that. Could we run services in 35 different countries on one platform? So super interesting challenge. Really, really, I just learned a heap in that, both from a technical point of view, travel as a space. If anyone's ever worked in travel or is an interest in it, it's a really unique set of challenges around how you have to process information in real time, because things like pricing and availability are changing constantly. So it's not like buying a product on a shelf, which is is it in stock, yes or no? It's when it comes to hotels and flights, everything's dynamic. And, you've got a hotel or an airline that might be selling seats or selling rooms through thousands of channels. So you kind of got all these unique kind of challenges with how you integrate, get this data and all of that stuff, trying to do it in a way which is fast and easy for consumers. So I learned a heap through that. And I learned a heap as well about working cross cultures. So again, that was my first experience properly, I'd say, with, working internationally, Yeah, working with developers from UK, even UK to US, there's cultural differences. And then we had Latin America, Argentina, we had Bangalore, India. And so I just got exposed to that, and kind of that ability to try and pull people together. Again, going back to what I was just saying about, that alignment behind the vision, and trying to strive to achieve something, working together, taking people on the journey. And so I think it was through that experience that Seek, I'm not sure how they found me or what have you, but they kind of, they reached out to me, and I think it was through LinkedIn or something like that. And it was one of those, I remember having a chat with my wife, and it was like, I have this company in Australia has sent me a message and said they'd be interested in having a chat. Like, should I have a chat? And she was like, oh, yeah, why not? And it was kind of interesting because I think I'd always thought at that point in time I was working in the US, and so I'd always thought, well, if my career takes me to anywhere internationally, it will be going to the US. But I got exposed to Seek, and then I got to meet the people at Seek, and again, similar story, which is just really great people, like that human level. So really great to talk to, really open and honest and candid. And then at a professional level, just super smart, really deep, great insights, doing really, really interesting things with kind of, this business in terms of helping people find jobs, and education, helping people kind of, get qualifications to open up career opportunities for them. So it was just through those conversations. And I think, what probably attracted Seek to talking to me, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think my experience that I'd had at Travelocity around trying to bring these kind of disparate brands internationally together, trying to coordinate product development, being able to build and share stuff rather than build everything separately, was very much the journey that Seek were about to embark on. So they've invested in lots of these international brands. So JobStreet, JobsDB in Southeast Asia. I don't think we'd gone deep on those investments at the point I joined, and we did very soon. Soon post, we had Xiaopin in China, we had Kako in Brazil, and OCC in Mexico, and obviously the big Seek business in Australia and New Zealand. So I think that the reason that maybe they asked me to come along for the ride was just because I'd been doing all of this work with Travelocity, and they could see that it was very similar to some of the things that they were keen to experiment with on their international portfolio. So it was one of those in the end where it was kind of like, my wife and I, my wife was working in Denmark at the time, so between Denmark and the UK, and for a big energy company. But she was like, well, look, for the chance to go and try Australia, I'll happily step away from my work and let's give it a go. And again, I'd enjoyed the ride with Travelocity, but I could see that, that we were actually struggling to close the gap on the big two players. And ultimately Travelocity ended up getting acquired by Expedia after I left, probably about maybe 18 months after I left. But yeah, I think you could see the signs there that we just weren't going to be able to compete. So it was kind of timing wise, it kind of made sense. And then it was like, well, why not go and give it a go? And we moved to Melbourne. We hadn't been here to visit. We kind of moved blind, if that makes sense. But we just kind of felt like when we look back, we would regret not taking that opportunity and trying it versus kind of saying yes. And then, we always said that we would never be too proud to put our hand up and say if we'd made a kind of mistake and we could move home again or what have you. So, but it was, again, fantastic move. And I was really fortunate to work for great people at Seek who, again, supported me, gave me the space to operate. And we were able to do some really interesting things in a really interesting business. I think with the purpose of Seek and what they've been able to achieve and continue to achieve today in terms of connecting people with the right employment opportunities. Again, it's a really interesting space. And that was kind of what brought me to it. It was kind of the purpose, the people. The move to Australia was almost a secondary thing. It was not. It was never by design. It was just that was where the business happened to be. So
you chose the role first, and then the location was the secondary consideration. It was primarily the role.
Absolutely, yeah. There was no, I wasn't out looking, or I wasn't trying to. Yeah, I'd never even thought really of moving to Australia. Like I say, if I'd been thinking of going anywhere, I probably would have been US. So it was just one of those things where I kind of the more I met people, I just got pulled into that story, and it was something I could feel myself getting excited about, wanting to be part of. And yeah, that's what brought us here.
Nice. One thing that strikes me as interesting about your journey in product, especially, is that you very seemingly seamlessly moved between different product roles within different industries, right? Whether it was in hotel, price comparison, jobs, and then you went into a sort of a bank. I think True Digital was a digital bank, if I remember correctly.
No, it's True Digital.
Sorry, it's
is a really
communication.
interesting one. Yeah, so it's kind of
okay,
it's born out of a telco, one of the
Yeah.
like the legacy big telco players in Thailand, and we were kind of the digital arm of that. But it's and again, we can talk about this in more detail in a second. But True Digital is a really interesting proposition because it's obviously part of the CP group, which is the massive kind of family health conglomerate, and they've got a portfolio of really interesting businesses from agriculture, food production, through to retail, 7-Eleven.
Nice.
Coffee shops. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. So we can talk about that stuff.
Yeah. Let's not spoil the discussion there. But back to my question. Yeah. So in your opinion and your experience, especially, is it important for product managers and product leaders by extension to sort of specialize, in a certain industry? Like, for example, it could be in travel and you say, hey, I really want to go deep here. Or do you think that it's always good to have this breadth of experience and knowledge across the different industries? I'm keen to know your thoughts, especially, like I said, given your experience.
Yeah, look, I think my answer is I think there's no right or wrong answer to that question. I think, again, I've been able to work with, people who are really deep and have really strong domain expertise in a particular industry. So whether that be travel or employment, work with people who have been working in that space for years, and that depth of knowledge brings with it just a really tacit understanding of all the different nuances and the elements of what's happening in that space. Similarly, I think that it can often be an asset, and I always try to do this with my teams, which is blending people who've been with the organization for a long time with people who are fresher and newer. Because again, I think with tenure in an organization, you basically just know where where all the bodies are buried. Like people who remember why a decision was made 8 years ago to go in a certain direction, or how a piece of software which is buried 6 layers deep is actually programmed, and who might know about it. Like, so that knowledge is equally as important as somebody who brings fresh eyes and fresh impetus and will come at a problem with a really different perspective. So I often think at a team level it's a blend of these things. I think for me, my own personal journey has been, obviously I've jumped between kind of these different industries, but like fundamentally I think when you come to like some of the product problems that you're trying to solve, there's lots of similarities between these kind of experiences at a fundamental level. So if you think about, I don't know, if you're working in a SaaS business, your SaaS business might be focused on a particular customer set of problem space. If you go and look at another SaaS business in a different area, there'll be lots of fundamentals which are actually kind of correlate between the two. Similarly for me, in my kind of, when I went from Confused to travel, the bulk of the skill set I brought from Confused was understanding like e-commerce funnels and conversion funnels. How do you move people through, how do you move people through a funnel? How do you set up great experiments to be able to find that and, lift that conversion? And that experience correlated really well to that travel space. So yeah, for me, I've always enjoyed the variety of like being able to move between problem spaces, because it's something which I take energy from, which is kind of like jumping into something where I'm really unfamiliar, and that brings a level of uncomfortableness, and you have to close that gap pretty quickly, right? Because even if you're not a domain expert, there is a minimum bar that you have to get past to be kind of credible and make good decisions and get the right data. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. I think some of it comes down to personal preference. I know people who've built really great careers and have a really massive impact, on both pathways, in terms of, moving between different types of company or different industries, as well as people who've specialized and gone really deep into a particular industry. And I think my advice would be, like, do what you're passionate about first and foremost. So if you're passionate about a certain space, or you're passionate about a certain type of problem, like just as long as you're excited to get up every day and be energized about the problems you're thinking about, like that's the first and foremost. And my advice would be use that as a barometer to kind of help you navigate. If you get offered new opportunities or you're thinking about a new opportunity, I would always put that as kind of a really high lens if you can, because I think that's fundamentally, when you're 6 months or 6 years into a role, it's going to be those kind of things which are really, really important, that you can feel good about the work you're doing and you're still excited to make a difference.
Nice. What you just mentioned has actually, I think you've opened Pandora's box a little bit, because you're saying that, if you try to follow your passion and you find a reason why you wake up every day. So here's one question that, I've asked in other episodes, and in general, it's this continuing discussion around, so what happens if you don't have passion? Like for you, product management is a job, it's a role. You want to make your salary and you just want to get through it, right? Is that a problem? And the reason why I ask this is that you read a lot about it, you hear a lot about it, and people talk a lot about it. Like, product management and passion and purpose, they seem to be so intrinsically linked. But, is that, because the 10% up at the top of the mountain are shouting it that way? Or do you feel like, that's true for most of the people, even at the lower levels who are just starting? Because I'm just keen to know what happens if you don't have passion and you're in product management. Does that mean you're doomed?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's quite as you're doomed, but I think I don't even think it's specific to product, but it's like whatever you're committing your time to, right? Like whether that be whatever your job is, whatever your role is. Ideally, you gravitate towards something, which will challenge you, will help you grow and learn, will help you put food on the table, give you a salary that you can live a lifestyle that kind of, equates to what you want to live. But it's something that you can kind of, you can see yourself doing, for a prolonged period of time. I think the lack of passion, like if somebody is just kind of punching a clock and kind of, they're not enjoying aspects of the role, I think over the long term, that's probably going to kind of be to their own personal detriment. Because again, if you're just working a role whereby you're not getting any sense of kind of mastery or purpose from it, you're not kind of enjoying that, I think that will start to weigh heavy over time. And then similarly for the company, it's really difficult to have high performers who are really delivering, massive impact if they're not really energized and excited about what they're doing, right? Because doing big things is often very hard, particularly when it comes to product, right? A lot of the things that we're doing with product is we're trying to solve problems which have not been solved before. Yeah. So to push through the barriers and the challenges that come with that, you need to have a really high level of perseverance and tolerance for failure, and this kind of relentlessness, this drive to get stuff done. The guy I worked with at Seek used to always talk about, like, our job was to find a way. And if you're not really passionate about something, like that perseverance to keep finding a way when it gets hard is often a real challenge. So for me, I'd say, if you're in a role that you're not passionate about today, and so you're in a product role, maybe it's the problem space which you're not passionate about, maybe it's the company you can't kind of align with the purpose or whatever it is. For me, I would be taking those as early indicators that you need to be trying to find something different which you can get passionate about and kind of energized about. And there's no need to panic or urgently do something drastic about that necessarily, like in terms of, right, I'm going to quit my job or whatever else, because your job often formulates elements which again support your family, support your livelihood, and all of those things. So, but But I think if you can have honest conversations with yourself and start to reflect and talk to, mentors, peers about what it is that you are excited about, what it is that you think you could contribute, all of those kind of things, and then just starting to plot a pathway for how can you move closer to that. So, I mean, I've had people work for me, for example, in product who've come from different disciplines. So we might have a software engineer who is a fantastic engineer, but has gravitated towards, wants to move towards product because they're keen to kind of, I guess, potentially be more involved in some of the decision making, or they want to get closer to the commercial side or whatever else, right? So they move in that direction. And then, potentially that product role is not for them, right? Because actually they realize there's lots of aspects of the role that they don't enjoy because, they'd rather, and this is also true of people leadership, I find as well, which is, and I had this battle myself when I was at Seek. I went in as I think I was a senior product manager, principal product manager. I can't remember what they called me, but basically I was just working, I had no direct reports. So I could just do stuff. It was great. I had no people to worry about managing and whatever else. And it actually took me quite a while to kind of get comfortable with that notion of, all right, I'm going to move into management and leadership and the responsibilities that entails, because again, you have to adapt. My role then became very different. I wasn't just on the tools all day, building products and stuff like that, which is part of the role I really love. It was much more about how do I enable my teams? How do I support my people? And so even in that lens as well, right, in terms of career paths within product, you'll find that there's really great, talented senior people, really great thinkers, really great executors who don't necessarily want to become people managers. They want to, they want to stay at that contributor kind of, actually hands-on being a product manager. And so again, for me, there's no right or wrong path to this stuff. I think it's just more about gravitating to what suits your personality, your style, knowing that you can change course as you go as well. Career paths are not linear. And, just being open and honest with yourself and the people who you're working with to have those conversations. I think that would be my advice.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers the question or not.
No, yeah, but I'm going to poke this a little bit further, right? So the reason why this question interests me a lot is because, if you compare to, let's say, you're I don't know, you're an auditor, right? Or you're a financial analyst or something like that. Your role is very operational. And as far as I know, right? And people who are listening, if you know any financial analysts who are crazy passionate about the jobs, let me know. But for most of them, it's a role, it's a job. But in product, you hear the word passion and purpose and product management a lot of times. And that's why I feel like I was just curious to know whether, how big of that passion comes into play, or does, just having the motivation, my motivation I'm not saying it's mine, by the way, but I'm just saying that for some people, the motivation for staying in product is because, hey, it's a good role, it pays well, or in their context, and, it puts food on the table. Is that sufficient? Will that get them through? Or does that mean that everyone in product has to be passionate? Because again, right, we also have the reality that not everyone on planet Earth wants to be an overachiever and change the world. So that's where I'm really trying to sort of, I guess, corner you into an answer there.
No, I think maybe it comes to the definition of passion, right? Because I think people show passion in different ways. So for me, it's not necessarily about either a particular personality type or a particular kind of style or whatever else, right? Again, for me, a passionate product manager is not somebody who has to be this extroverted kind of, great at doing the kind of the rah-rah kind of team speeches and all of that stuff, right? You do get product managers in that mold. But again, some of the best product managers who've worked for me definitely sit in kind of that introverted bracket, much more deep thinkers, very uncomfortable if you put them in front of, a team meeting to share their results or whatever else. But for them, their passion bubbles through in other ways in terms of how they like to get their arms around problems and the processes and the work that they do to kind of build it out. So, yeah, I think, again, and I would say even on the financial analyst side or whatever role you pick, I think, obviously there's lots of people out there in the world who are in roles where they don't get that degree of engagement. And it is you're working a job you're working a job because you need to pay the bills and whatever else. And I think, again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fine. And those people will make really, really good contributions. And again, I think it applies in the same way in the product space, which is you can have highly competent people, very, very capable, who will do a really good job, a solid job of running a product team, helping improve a product or whatever else, without necessarily being overtly passionate about it. But I think, if you have that choice or that opportunity, for me, if you can build somebody's capabilities and then pair that with passion, like that's where you get the exponential kind of results and the really, really high performers. So yeah, I would say, like, if there was a member of my product team who came to me and said, "Oh, Chris, I'm just really not enjoying the project I'm on or the product I'm working on," and we unpacked that, and it became obvious that there was a lack of alignment, in terms of, whether it be the vision or the purpose of that product or whatever it is. Ultimately, my natural inclination would be to start thinking about, okay, well, how can we move this person towards an area whereby they can unlock that passion, and if, and I've had conversations with people where maybe that passion is that they need to move to another company in a different space or whatever else to kind of find that, right? So again, I think I would say, if you can have that passion, like, I think that's ultimately what will help you kind of, I think, really have the really big impact, really, really grow, really kind of challenge yourself. Operating without that, particularly for a long period of time, I think it just gets kind of hard. So yeah, when I'm recruiting for product managers, actually for any role, like if I use my startup at the moment, I'm looking for people who are passionate about what we're trying to do. Like that's one of my key bars in terms of the hiring criteria, because we could have a really highly capable person, but if they're not passionate about why we exist, what we're trying to achieve, like, again, for me, capability without that passion, it's just hard to equate that to a really high performer over a long period of time. So yeah, I would almost hire for passion first, and then fill the capability gaps in later. That'd be my view as a hiring manager and how I think about it. So yeah,
that's great. Yeah, thanks. I was really trying to get to the crux of it, and I think you handled it really well. So thank you. All right. So you talked about something touched on, which I think again makes a good segue into the next part, which is you were saying that at Seek you were moving from this individual contributor into the sort of people management role, and then after that you moved to True Digital as the Chief Product Officer. Now, this, in my opinion, or at least from the outside looking in, because I don't know how you personally felt, but it felt like you were now taking a double leap again, right? Because you were moving into this very senior role, Chief Product Officer, and at the same time moving to Asia, Southeast Asia, in Thailand. How difficult was that to sort of cope with just adapting to a new working environment? And maybe you didn't think there was much adaptation culture wise, and also adapting to this really senior product leader role.
Yeah. So I think I was fortunate in my time at Seek that I was able, I had great support from peers and management, and we were able to build something which, over my time at Seek, I think by the time I left Seek, I had something like 110 people kind of in my kind of organization. I'd grown not only to looking after product managers, but I had, software engineers and data science people, AI people. So it was a really great ride and a really good kind of growth story. And we built that team with this kind of global nature. So I had people in Melbourne, I had people in Sao Paulo, Brazil, I had people in Asia, across KL and Hong Kong. And we were working on some really interesting problems and things. And so I think kind of that's what stretched, I guess, my leadership muscle, and it kind of made me think, my last few years at Seek were very much about how do we create an organization which is high performance, delivers really great outcomes. How do we build and retain our talent? How do we organize ourselves? So kind of just a really different set of questions. And I think those questions and thinking about that a lot are what kind of set me up for kind of the role at True Digital, where, again, similar to my experience of joining Seek, it was like the experience I'd picked up in my last few years at Seek was kind of essentially akin to what True Digital were kind of looking to try and do in terms of building out a product culture. How do they organize? They had this really big portfolio of products. They were in the process of internationalizing the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam. So it was just, again, I think a lot of my experiences that I'd had at Seek kind of set me up for that. And then it was like, well, can I go in and apply that same knowledge in a slightly different context again? So for me, it didn't feel like a huge leap in terms of like seniority in terms of the roles. I think when I moved to True Digital was about 1,500 person organization. I only had in that product team at the time, I think I had 9 people. And in the course of my kind of however long I was there, just under 16 months or something like that, we kind of grew that team. I think it was like 52 by the time I left. So again, it was very, very much about how do we scale a product organization? How do we find and bring in the right talent? How do we set that talent up for success? How do we deliver results? And again, this is that plate spinning balance, right? Because I couldn't have gone into True Digital and said, okay, give me 2 years to build this all out for you and then come back and ask for some outcomes. It was like, no, you have to kind of build the analogy of build the plane while it's flying type thing. So that was very true there. So yeah, it was a super interesting challenge. And I think I've worked a lot obviously in KL, as you touched on at the beginning. I had teams there. I'd worked in Hong Kong through my time at Seek. I'd done some work with the team in China. So I kind of felt like, Southeast Asia is, often it gets bundled as one place, right? It's not. It's very unique yes. Cultures, languages, et cetera. So, but I kind of felt like, well, going into Thailand, at least I can draw on some of that knowledge and experience. And so I'm not going in as a kind of a completely a westernized kind of person coming straight from Australia or the UK without that knowledge base.
Yeah.
And then I also like what True Digital were doing was the president there was being really diligent about how he built his team, which was, he was bringing in some expat knowledge in specific areas to help bolster capability and bring experience in, but very much was balancing that with like really great kind of like local Thai management. So our management team, I think we had 10 on the management team of that business. It was literally a 50-50 split of 5 of us were kind of expats and 5 were Thai. And that was really, really important because, my ability to communicate to a 1,500 person organization who, maybe 200 to 300 of them spoke English, was always going to be limited. So essentially we had to rely on work together a lot to convey messages and make sure that, again, going back to that storytelling of behind the vision, understanding the purpose, getting clarity about what it is that we're trying to achieve. So that was a really interesting part of the experience for me, because it was probably the first time in my career where I couldn't just walk around the halls and tap someone on the shoulder because I can't converse in Thai, and and don't get me wrong, everyone's English there was fantastic. So I'd always say to people, people often apologize for their English or whatever else. It was like my answer was always, no, your English is far better than my Thai. So we're doing great that we can even converse in a little way. But what was interesting about it was it just kind of, again, just challenged, that leadership style and how you then have to rely on, your direct reports to cascade messages down, things like feedback loops from the teams in terms of how are people feeling about where we're heading, our progress, what pain points are there, what do they need management to help them solve. Again, it was just really interesting having to do that in the context of, I guess operating as where English was the kind of second language. So that was a really interesting learning. And then I think, another interesting part of it for me was, again, so we were this division inside of, we were called True Digital, and we were kind of inside. We had a big organization ourselves, but a lot of our value proposition was enhanced by the partnerships we had with all of these sister companies.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just really fascinating for me to be kind of exposed to kind of some of that kind of, I guess, trying to bring people on this journey of like digital transformation, thinking about what a product-led business should be doing, evangelizing for, putting the customer first, thinking about the data-led decision making, and all of those kind of things. It was just a really interesting challenge because, again, you're working with lots of different parts of these organizations who, have been exposed to this type of thinking in to varying degrees and what have you. So it was a really interesting challenge to kind of go in and trying to be able to do that again with influence, because I didn't, we own all of the 7-Elevens in Thailand.
Yeah.
So it was a really big retail channel for us and a really important partner for several assets of our product portfolio. But obviously 7-Eleven is their own standalone business. So it's kind of like, there's no hierarchy or what have you to be able to say, okay, well, this business needs to do that or whatever else. It's much more about, can you find something which is mutually beneficial, is going to help support, their growth and our growth. And so working through those kind of things was just, really, really interesting challenges. But we had support. Our chairman was a really big supporter of, the digital advancement of the whole organization. So, with his advocacy support, just we were able to push through lots of these kind of hurdles. And I think that company, they're building out some really really interesting products and services and stuff. So I'm pleased that I would have liked to have stayed there longer. I think me finishing up there was kind of driven predominantly by kind of personal reasons and the need to move back to Australia. But I'm proud that I was able to play some small part in helping them kind of take that next step on their journey. And then I know that the team that I kind of have built and left behind there, obviously I'm still in touch with many of them, and they're still pushing on and doing some really great things. So I think the team is one of my proudest achievements in that role was the talent we were able to bring in and how we were able to move that part of the organization forward. I think so. Yeah,
nice. So, sorry, follow-up question. What was it like to work in would you call True Digital I don't think they would be considered startup, right? But they would.
No, probably not. I mean, we tried to bring in a lot of the startup ethos and kind of that scrappiness and kind of sense of ownership, etc. But we were able then to draw on a whole bunch of assets which a startup would never have.
Right.
We had these existing customer bases from these existing businesses, which gave us an unfair advantage. We had the ability to scale teams in a way where, again, a startup, as I'm finding myself now as a startup founder, we can't, the dollars, you have to be very frugal with every single dollar you spend. So no, it was a blend. I'd call it it was almost like a digital innovation arm.
Okay. Yeah.
Within this really large organization.
Yeah. But I think that you touched on the point that I wanted to sort of needle a little bit, which is the bringing that startup ethos, right? And like you said, True Digital is part of this massive conglomerate. So it's a behemoth that's been there. They own all the 7-Eleven, so it's not something small. Especially if you've been to Thailand, there's 7-Eleven in literally every corner. So this is not a small organization. And you're trying to bring this startup ethos, and you were trying to build this product culture. What was it like? Or maybe I should ask you a more direct question. What was the number one challenge of trying to build a product culture that brings the startup ethos, but still being part of this behemoth of, a large conglomerate where, things move slowly and all of that?
Yeah, look, I think it's, I think what were the big challenges? I think, so first and foremost, I think one of the challenges for me was to actually put together an organization which could tackle the scale of the problems that we were trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So again, it was very much about how can we put together a product organization which has the right skill sets and the right capacity to be able to work across this portfolio. Because that was one thing I think which was apparent to me when I arrived, was that the operation had been very, very lean. from a product perspective, and essentially it was very difficult then to kind of work across this wide portfolio with so few hands and brains working on it. So I think the first challenge was around how do we set ourselves up to actually having a chance of succeeding at this thing, and it was about that organizational kind of setup and alignment, and and that's not just product, right? That was me working very closely with our CTO, with our UX teams, with our management teams, marketing teams, around how do we set up proper cross-functional teams who can actually work together on all of these diverse problem spaces that we're being asked to look at. So it was that was, I think, challenge number one, was set ourselves up for success. Then I think, the second challenge with this stuff is I think it's about how do you kind of build alignment and collaboration more broadly across this organization. So again, it was kind of, if you think about it, within our 1,500 person team, building organizational alignment and clarity of purpose, and understanding of what our KPIs were and what we needed to move, and then making sure that we had people working on those things and supported, etc. Doing that within the 1,500 person organization was hard, but it was all within our control.
Yeah.
And then you layer out the wider group where you don't have that necessarily that same alignment in terms of people's incentives may be slightly different, pieces of work that people care about might be slightly different. So I think, again, the challenge was around kind of build those relationships, get to a common understanding, being able to kind of help people understand how we were thinking about things. Because again, a lot of these other companies are they're not digital first companies. They have a desire to become more digitally kind of digitally enabled or whatever else, but that's not in their DNA. So it's kind of again, it's kind of going on that journey together, building trust, and I think you build trust by, achievement and outcomes, right? So you're kind of trying to show people in small, low risk, low cost ways about what you can achieve working together. And I think, again, that was the bulk of my work, and my day was around supporting my teams and the pieces of work that we were being asked to kind of look at and drive, and basically giving them as much chance of success by making sure that we were retaining, good alignment, good support with all of these other different parts of the business who, without that collaboration, we would struggle to be able to, actually deliver the very best outcome. So if I try and give you an example to make it real, we launched an Android TV product, so a standalone kind of box, one of the first in Thailand. I think it's grown massively. I think we've done over 1 million units now. So we kind of launched this proposition, but obviously that box relies on the content on which we can serve to our consumers, right? So the tech and the product experience on the box is enabled by the actual content that we have. So True has a really big content acquisition team. They produce their own things for TV channels, and they run their own news networks. And so again, really important collaboration here is we could build an amazing, technically proficient box. It could have a really great UX, UI experience, do everything you need it. But if the content that was available through that didn't meet our consumers' needs and the market segment's needs, then it wouldn't have succeeded. So it was just really important, again, that close collaboration of being able to kind of work together, build that shared kind of, that shared alignment of what it is we're trying to achieve, and being able to tap into those different skill sets, made that successful. And then, so that's kind of actually creating the product and the experience. And then we had our sales channels, which are through the big shop network in True. We did a bunch of things with the telco where we were bundling it into, in with all these packages. And so we have a, really strong revenue team at True Digital who, they're, doing a lot of that work to make sure that that partnership and how we're accounting for these things, it all makes sense. But across the organization, it was all of these touch points of collaboration. So again, it was kind of, you couldn't do any of this in isolation. You couldn't just sit there with, a product team and a UX team and a software engineering team and do this thing. It was no, there's all of these different elements have to come together to actually make this thing successful and grow. And that was the case on most of our products that we were working on.
Because that was the offline element to support the online, the tech part of it as well, right? Which just adds to the complexity as well.
Exactly. But yeah, it was great. Again, a great fun, really great people. Thailand, if anyone ever gets the chance to work in Thailand, I would recommend it. I think it's a great, experience. Bangkok is it's a really great city with food and culture, and we had a blast there. And like I say, would have happily stayed longer if personal circumstances didn't kind of pull us back to Australia. But and hopefully you can find. I didn't realize you were trying to get people from Thailand for the podcast, so I'll have to hit up a few of the folks I know over there for you and see if I can wrestle up some
nice
guys, because there's definitely lots happening over there in the startup scene. I think it's typically pretty insular. Like Thailand as a market is pretty, because of the language, I think, and the cultural understanding. A lot of the businesses there kind of focus initially on that market, but there's definitely lots of interesting things happening there from a product and tech perspective.
Yes,
some really interesting businesses. So.
For sure, yeah. Let me know, man. I'm always happy to get, especially when I can get leaders from, especially within the very strict vicinity of Southeast Asia, because I think that's the stories that I love to tell. But yeah, so let's move to then Tacklit, right? Because after leaving True Digital, and you had the personal reasons that you had to leave, and you moved back to Australia, you decided to start up Tacklit, right? I'll ask you a little bit more about what Tacklit does and the industry that it's in. But more importantly, it is your own startup. So you've decided to do your own thing. What made you decide to do that? Like, why not, go back to, looking for product leadership roles? Because I know that in Australia, product management is it's much more mature than in Southeast Asia, and there's demand. So why decide to do your own thing?
Yeah, good question. So I think there's a couple of factors which played in for me. So firstly, as my career's developed and grown into kind of like leadership positions, the time I've been able to spend actually creating products has kind of diminished as my roles kind of and responsibilities have shifted more into other areas. So I was kind of interested and keen to try and get back to like something smaller, more nascent, kind of actually something where I could put my hands on actually, building the experience and really kind of getting into it. So that was kind of one desire for me, having worked in some of these bigger organizations and in these leadership roles. So that was one thing that was on my mind. And then secondly, I was always intending on doing my own thing. I kind of feel like, I don't know, maybe it's natural for people who gravitate towards product and product management, like that kind of work, that we probably fit that bracket a little bit of the kind of the founder mindset. But I was always intending on wanting to have a crack at my own thing, and I think again it just comes down from the fact that I like new challenges, I like new experiences, I like to kind of be outside my comfort zone, and I always felt like I'm fortunate I've been able to work with lots of really great founders in all of my roles as we've done M&A activity, partnership activity, and what have you. So I've been able to kind of watch and learn and kind of play a role in helping those organizations kind of think about product. And I don't know, I always had that inkling of like, it's something I would like to test myself with and I'd like to try. And if I didn't try, many years from now, it'd probably be one of the things I look back and regret, saying, no, I should have had the courage to take the plunge. So those two things were playing together. And then I've been kind of nurturing through my network, as we all do, I think, as you kind of move through different geographies and different companies, you gravitate towards people who you would like to work with again. And I've been able to kind of, I've been nurturing a few of those kind of relationships. And it just so happened kind of at the beginning of 2020, probably about a year ago, kind of like the stars aligned where a few of those people who I wanted to work with again were also coming out of existing engagements and gigs and what have you. So kind of like timing wise, it felt really kind of good. So it was kind of this mix of wanting to go back to smaller, more hands-on, having this itch of wanting to try a startup, and then also the timing aligning with my fellow co-founders to be able to actually work on the problem set together. So yeah, that's what pushed us kind of over the edge. And so we've been working on the business now for probably about a year. I'd say the first 3 months was kind of informal. We're doing a big kind of research phase, understanding the space that we were looking at, and we formally incorporated the company in at the end of June 2020. And we're excited to be building products to support the mental health ecosystem. I think it's a really interesting space. Again, we founded it based around a purpose. My co-founder in the UK had his own lived experience with kind of mental health, and it was from understanding his challenges of the realization that he needed help, to then accessing care and then getting high quality care that actually helped him improve his situation. Like, just lots of friction along that journey, and that's what made us look at the space. And when we looked, we felt like there's this really big opportunity that some of the right technology and the right kind of data and insights could really help actually help support that ecosystem. So that's kind of why we founded Tacklit, and what we're working hard on trying to deliver.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was going to ask you about why health tech, but I guess you've already answered that question. So yeah, really good. So yeah, Tacklit is probably less than a year old now, and it's operational and it's running. And given that you've chosen to go into the health tech industry, is there like this added pressure to ensure that your own team is coping well mentally, given the space that you're in? Like, because you are dealing with health tech, so there is like, it feels like, I don't know, when I think about it, I feel this added pressure, right? Is that real, or is like, no, it doesn't? Yeah.
I probably wouldn't think about it as added pressure. I think like what's been great for us, I think a couple of things. So one is our founding team and our early team that we put together is based on really strong existing relationships. So pretty much everyone in our team, I think we've got like 10 people working on the business now. I'd say 9 out of that 10 have worked with me directly before.
Nice.
So the really strong existing set of relationships and stuff there, which has really helped us, particularly in an era of COVID where we can't travel to bring everyone together. And we have people in Australia, we have people in the UK, we have people in Malaysia working on the company. And so that existing trust and relationships has been great, because we've been able to leapfrog like what we can do as a team together because we've got those existing relationships. So that's first and foremost. And I think the reason that people have gravitated, hopefully, to working with us is, again, that shared set of values and alignment behind what it is that we're trying to do. So again, we're proudly a purpose-driven organization. Our goal is to have this really, really kind of big impact. But if we can just help one person along the way, our endeavor has kind of been worth it. So that's another thing which has been important. And then, when it comes to the mental well-being side of it, I think that we do things like all of our team have a flexible day's leave every month. So we call it a mental wellness day. Essentially, it's just a day that you can take, it's an ad hoc day you can take at any point where, you can just use it to refresh, recharge. You might want to use it to spend time with family. You might want to use it to run errands or whatever else, because, if you don't do those errands, that can add stress and pressures or whatever else. So we do small pieces like that. But again, I don't think it's about us being under more pressure. I think we holistically kind of care about our team, and we approach it. We like to think we approach it in kind of the right way, with a real people first kind of attitude. And I think that's been really important during the pandemic, because everyone's been having to work from home. Working from home when I know from my own experience, I've got 2 young kids at home, and if I'm trying to do a call in the front office and in my house, how I've lost count of the number of Zoom meetings which have been gate crashed by my toddler. And I think you just gotta, I think what I've learned definitely over this last year is, just having more patience for this type of stuff, more understanding. People need to take time off because childcare arrangements have been closed because of lockdown, or there's certain things that get in the way. I think we've just been trying to be really flexible and accommodating, and again understand that everyone's doing their best, and like you have to juggle all these different things. So yeah, that's just kind of how we approach it, how we think about it. And yeah, I think, it's because we have our co-founder Rich, who he's still kind of working through his own things as well. So we have that constant reminder and good conversations with him about how we make sure that we're asking our team, are you okay, and making sure they're getting the right support. So yeah, so I don't think it's pressure to do more or whatever else, but I think like just our natural approach maybe is, and maybe this is why we're working on this space, is because we have empathy for that kind of challenge that we all face. So yeah.
Okay. Next question here is then, you mentioned it well, right? That, you want to have empathy and all that, and that's great. But at the same time, I guess where I'm trying to get to is, you are a startup, and there are constraints of, your runway, how long you can do this for before you really need to start thinking about making serious decisions. And at the same time, you don't want to over push. How do you maintain that balance? I guess that would be the bigger question.
Yeah, I think so I think you're right. Again, I think it's just about balancing our desire to do all of the things that we would like to do with the pragmatic lens of, well, what's actually kind of achievable. So I think, where that comes to is, and it's not too dissimilar from working in product in any organization, but it's like that real focus on what's important. So, how many things are we saying no to versus how many things are we saying yes to? Because, what we don't want to do is we don't want to do a bad job of lots of things. We want to do a really great job on the things that are the most important. So I think it's just, again, that prioritization process that we go through to make sure that the time we're spending, the dollars we're spending, is going into the areas that we think is going to have the most meaningful impact for the company at the stage that it's in.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing. And then I think, the other thing is probably more fundamentals, which is like, we have a really keen eye on our burn. We're monitoring very specifically about where we're spending our money and how fast we're spending it, and making sure we're basically making known choices along the way. Because sometimes we decide to spend more aggressively, sometimes we decide to wind spend back. But as long as that's a known decision and we're understanding the consequences of our actions and stuff like that, that's kind of great for us. So we're happy bootstrapping along, and kind of it's been we've been building for 8 months now. We actually launched the product in mid-January, so we're no longer pre-revenue. We've actually got revenue, real customers now, and it's just really exciting. It's again super early for us, and we're there's lots of things for us to overcome and to work out and other things. But yeah, we're excited about the early progress, and kind of I describe it as like being halfway up a mountain kind of thing. Not even halfway up a mountain, but like kind of you look backwards and you see we've kind of gone from the ground to here, and then you turn around and you look at the rest of the way to go. So we try and balance that, right? Which is like enjoying our the progress that we've made and being proud of that, and making sure we celebrate that, but then being really clear that we haven't created anything which is meaningful yet. We've got a long way to go to get there. So that's how I think about it.
All right, last two questions before we go into the last segment. I'm sorry, because this has been a really interesting conversation. So in terms of you moving from product into the CEO role, do you think that this is sort of a natural transition? Because so again, I'll tell you where I'm coming from. Because at one point in time, people were always saying product manager is the mini CEO, and everyone said, oh, that's debunked because you don't have the same influence, blah blah blah. But at the same time, there is this seemingly pattern of product leaders then going on to become, in my book, pretty good CEOs. So do you think that that's natural transition, or?
I mean, and I remove myself from this conversation, right? Because whether I'm a good CEO or not, my team will probably give you, I hope they would give you a good answer, but I'm not confident they would, right? So, but I think what the role of product, I think, gives you is just an exposure to all of these different key levers on like delivering a really great customer experience and customer outcome, which in my mind is the bedrock on which any organization is built on, right? It's kind of like, if you can win customers, convert those customers to loyal customers, keep them happy, retained, like regardless of the industry that you're in or the product you're building or whatever else, like those fundamentals remain the same. And I think the role of product management means you have to get into each of those kind of problem spaces for the product that you're working on, to try and understand, what are we going to do to grow? What are we going to do to improve, like the activation usage of our product, whatever that metric is, depending on your context, and how do we keep people, loyal from churning or whatever else, right? So I think product just gives you this grounding in these disciplines, which are fundamental for every kind of business. I think the other thing which has been good, at least in my experience from transitioning from product to CEO, is in my product roles, I've been exposed to finance and budget cycles. So, in terms of how do you build a P&L up, how do you account for all of these kind of costs and other things? So kind of like you learn a bit about the finance side, and then from a legal perspective, contracts and partnerships and other stuff. Right? I'm no legal expert by any sense, but I've been exposed to those kind of documents and other things before. So again, I think, and then from a HR perspective, right, recruiting people, making sure that they're set up for success and all of those things. So I think what product gives you is like this kind of good grounding, this good taste across all of these things that are important when you're starting your own company. Because I'm reminded every day, I look around, I don't have a HR person in my team, I don't have a finance person, I don't have a legal person. It's like the buck stops with me, right? And me and my co-founders working together, right? So it's kind of that grounding, I think, really, really helps. And I think there's probably, again, something innate in people who gravitate towards working in product around trying to build things, like that passion for building stuff, creating something from nothing. Again, I think you have to have a lot of that kind of innate in you as you're starting to build a company, I think, and to do it. And maybe you're not a product expert, maybe you're a founder from more of a commercial side or from more of a technical side or wherever it may be. But I think that innate desire to want to create something and see something come to life, etc., is kind of there as well. So yeah, I think I was never a big fan of the mini CEO kind of analogy for product managers. I think not that there was anything necessarily wrong with it, but I always kind of felt like the product manager's role was more around, kind of this idea of being like a conductor, kind of like you're actually pulling together and helping organize and set up all these other different, musicians who actually play, their part of a tune or whatever. And your goal is to try and help coordinate that and set them up for success, to make sure that they can work together and you can kind of, for the sake of my analogy, you can create some nice music together kind of thing. So, so I think that's an important skill set, I think, inside of a startup, is that desire to want to create something and just trying to make stuff happen, I think. And again, I'm fortunate in my career where I've been in product roles where I've had the room to be able to, to do those things, to actually try and make stuff happen. And I'm just trying to apply that same mindset now that, it's our own company and we're trying to build this thing. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, I hope one day I will be able to get you back on the show to talk more specifically about Tacklit and how it has grown. Now it's still early days, so hopefully we'll have you back for part 2.
Right. We can do it can either be the story of it's grown and we're still going, or it can be the story of we failed and this is what we learned, right? So hopefully we'll get an interesting story on one way or the other. But we definitely hope that it will be that.
Exactly. So
and having a big impact for sure.
Yeah, of course, I wish you all the best, and I obviously want that story to be like that nice story. But yeah, I mean, even if it doesn't, like you said, right? There's always things to learn, and failure is never the end, right? It just means that it's another opportunity to start. So fantastic. All right, so let's go on to my last question, which is the last section of this show, which is the song. and you chose a very interesting song. Actually, I'll let you introduce it and why you chose this song.
Yeah, so when you asked me to share one piece of music, I was like, it's actually really interesting. Really interesting. Maybe it says something about myself, kind of narrative or whatever else. I find it really interesting and difficult to try and pick one song. So, yeah, so I picked this song. I'm not sure if people would have heard of this band. They're called Embrace. They're a UK band. I think they were around kind of late 90s, early 2000s, and that was kind of when I had a bunch of my formative years in terms of, you know, university and other things. And so that kind of genre of music was really, really popular. I picked this track because, well, for two reasons. This was a track that my wife and I played as the very last song on our kind of wedding day. So this was the song that we played before they like turned the lights on and kicked everybody out, kind of thing. So I kind of remember it for that. And the reason it's now front of mind for me again is, so I got two young kids, a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and often, you know, as I think all parents do, I'm often singing them off to sleep or to keep them calm or whatever it is. And I found that I've got this weird memory for these old songs where they're the lyrics that I remember. So I actually end up singing this song to my kids just because it's probably one of about 10 songs that I can actually remember the lyrics to. So they get this really eclectic mix of Britpop kind of esque, Oasis, and all of these other kind of random songs mixed in with their nursery rhymes. So that was why I landed on this one. I thought I'd share it with you guys. It's called Embrace, and the song's Looking As You Are.
Yeah, I listened to it, and I really got this. I got this feeling, and I confirmed it by reading the comments that, you know, it really had this Coldplay vibe to it as well, right? So I guess the hard question for you is, who's cooler, Coldplay or Embrace?
Oh man, I don't think who came first. I mean they were probably around a similar time, I guess. Yeah, very similar genre. I think those kind of who's cooler? I would not know. I guess Coldplay have been around for, you know, they seem to have gone further and longer than Embrace did. So maybe that's the answer. But yeah, no, I think I'd definitely lean towards Embrace's music over Coldplay. I think if I was having to pick between the two.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the song was very nice. I really enjoyed it, and I like Coldplay too. So yeah, it was a very nice fit. And yeah, and I the reason why I put this section in the show is because it's usually a curveball for everyone that gets on the show. It forces them to think a little bit harder, because if we ask, you know, your favorite book or whatever, you know, it's going to be very, I think, not as varied as if I would ask you what your song is. So and thank you for introducing me, because now I have a new band to check out.
Well, so. My book at the moment is, again, driven by my 2-year-old. So Hungry Caterpillar is top of our reading pile. So I'm reading that one most nights at the moment. So
very nice.
I think your times and tastes change, at least in my experience, with the influence of the young kids at home, for sure.
That's
Gone are
true.
the days of reading you know, the business books and other things. It's more the Hungry Caterpillar and the like for me now.
I know, right? You struggle to read like one chapter, because, you know, the minute you have some free time, you know, you want to spend it with a child, or your child wants to spend it with you. So you're like, all right, I'll put this book down. Yeah, bring the Hungry Caterpillar one. So totally understood. Well, all right, I've taken up a lot more time than I intended, and I apologize so much, but this has been a really interesting session. Thank you so much, Chris, for agreeing to be on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Chris Griffiths, who is now the CEO of Tacklit. Sorry, I did forget one last question. You know, a la Apple, right? You know, one last thing. Did you have any final thoughts or any advice that you want to leave with our viewers and listeners?
Oh man, gosh, no. Look, I mean, hopefully we covered off some stuff that was interesting there, for your listeners. And yeah, thanks for asking me to be part of the show, Colin. I think it's always love to talk product and things. And yeah, if anyone's interested in Tacklit, wants to learn more about what we're doing, wants to come and join us on the journey, you know, we're hiring people. So yeah, kind of hit me up and let's have a conversation.
Nice. All right. Okay. Now I can do the proper closing. That was Chris Griffiths, the CEO of Tacklit. I'm really thankful that he agreed to be on the show, and I hope that all of you who are listening and watching enjoyed it as much as I do. we're almost at the end of COVID. I think that with vaccines and people being careful, we're seeing hopefully us coming out of it as a human race. But until we're fully out, please continue to be safe and take care of yourself. And if you need some help with your mental health, Tacklit's the way to go. All right. Thank you all. And I'll see you at the next episode. Bye-bye.